The alien wind howled like a wounded beast outside the narrow mouth of the cave, carrying ice crystals sharp enough to cut exposed skin. Talia Nash huddled against the cold stone wall, her surveyor's uniform providing little protection against the plummeting temperature. The emergency beacon blinked steadily beside her, its red light casting eerie shadows across the rocky interior. "How long until hypothermia?" she asked through chattering teeth, her breath forming dense clouds in the frigid air. Across the small cave, Jared Weller consulted his wrist device, the blue glow illuminating his worried features. "At this rate? 20 minutes, maybe less." "Excellent," Talia muttered, rubbing her hands together frantically. Some survey mission this turned out to be. The xenobotanist glanced up at her, his expression softening. "The storm came out of nowhere. Not your fault." Talia appreciated the sentiment, but it did little to warm her freezing limbs. The mission brief had mentioned nothing about the extreme temperature fluctuations on this uncharted planet. What had been merely chilly when they'd separated from the main research team had transformed into bone-crushing cold that threatened to kill them both before morning. She studied her unexpected companion in the dim light. Jared wasn't supposed to be here at all. His xenobotany research had taken him away from the base camp just as the storm hit, and they'd found each other by chance, two lost humans in an alien wilderness. Now they were trapped together, at least until the storm passed or rescue arrived. "Your core temperature is dropping dangerously," Jared said, moving closer to check his readings. "We need to do something." "Got any brilliant solutions, plant doctor?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Fear did that to her, made her sharp when she should be grateful. After all, at least she wasn't facing death alone. Jared didn't respond to her tone. Instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out what looked like a tightly folded piece of silver fabric. "Emergency thermal wrap," he explained, his voice steady despite the cold. "Standard issue for field researchers." Talia's heart leapt with hope. "That's perfect. Toss it over." But Jared hesitated, his fingers tracing the metallic edge of the wrap. "It's not that simple. These are designed to reflect and amplify existing body heat. With your current temperature." He shook his head. "It wouldn't be enough on its own. So I'm done for." Talia laughed bitterly, the sound echoing harshly off the cave walls. "Perfect end to a perfect day." "Not necessarily," Jared replied, beginning to unfold the thermal wrap. It expanded into what looked like a high-tech silver sleeping bag, gleaming in the dim light. "But it will require something you might find uncomfortable." Talia raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "We need to share body heat," he said matter-of-factly. "Direct contact would be most effective." She stared at him, processing the implications. "You mean?" "Yes," he confirmed, his expression professional despite the intimate suggestion. "The less barriers between us, the better the heat transfer." Talia swallowed hard. She'd known Jared professionally for all of 3 weeks at the research base, exchanged perhaps a dozen sentences with him before today. Now he was suggesting they strip down and cuddle for survival. "Where I come from," she said slowly, "getting naked with someone you just met is usually complicated." A ghost of a smile touched Jared's lips. "Where I come from, survival takes precedence over social awkwardness." He spread the thermal wrap on the cave floor, its interior glowing with a soft silver light. "But I understand your hesitation." Another violent shiver racked Talia's body, and she knew she was running out of options. "Survival," she finally said, her fingers fumbling with the clasp of her uniform jacket. "Definitely survival." "Wise choice," Jared replied, turning his back to give her privacy as he began removing his own outer layers. Minutes later, they lay side by side in the thermal wrap, down to their undergarments, their bodies cautiously pressed together. Jared's skin was surprisingly warm against hers, and Talia couldn't help but notice the pleasant scent of him, something earthy and clean that reminded her of the botanical gardens back on Earth. "Your heart rate has increased," Jared observed, his voice quiet in the small space between them. "Are you still cold?" Something like that, Talia murmured, trying to maintain some semblance of professional detachment despite their intimate position. The truth was more complicated. It had been years since she'd been this close to another person. Her career as a planetary surveyor didn't leave much room for relationships, and she'd long ago accepted solitude as the price of exploration. Try to relax, Jared suggested, cautiously shifting his arm to create a more comfortable position. The wrap works better when circulation is optimal. Talia made a conscious effort to release the tension in her muscles, letting her body settle more naturally against his. The immediate warmth that spread through her was almost shocking in its intensity. Better? He asked. Much, she admitted, surprised by how quickly comfort had replaced awkwardness. Where did you train? Your voice has an accent I can't place. Mars Colony, Jared replied. Second generation. That explained a lot. Martian colonists were known for their pragmatism and lack of pretense. Life in the domed cities bred a straightforward approach to most problems, including, apparently, survival cuddling with virtual strangers. Earthborn, Talia offered in return. Northern European district. Jared nodded, his chin lightly brushing the top of her head. I suspected as much. You have that reserved quality. Is that a polite way of calling me uptight? She asked, surprised to find herself almost smiling. Not at all, he replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Just culturally conditioned to value personal space. The howling wind outside intensified, but within their silver cocoon, a small pocket of warmth had formed. Talia felt her extremities tingling as blood flow returned to her fingers and toes. Your body temperature is rising, Jared observed. The wrap is working. You're working, Talia corrected before she could stop herself. The wrap is just helping. A moment of silence passed between them, filled only by the sound of their synchronized breathing. When this storm passes, Jared said finally, we'll need to head east. The main research camp should be about 18 kilometers from here. If we can find the ridge line, Talia added, slipping back into the comfort of professional discussion. I mapped it yesterday. It should lead us straight to the camp. As they spoke of navigation and survival plans, Talia became increasingly aware of how their bodies had naturally adjusted to each other, his arm now curved protectively around her shoulders, her head resting comfortably against his chest. The initial awkwardness had dissolved, replaced by something that felt surprisingly natural. We should try to rest, Jared suggested as their conversation lulled. Conservation of energy is important. The storm might last for hours. Talia nodded against his chest, already feeling the heavy pull of exhaustion. The day's events, getting separated from her team, the frantic search for shelter, the brush with hypothermia, had drained her completely. Thank you, she murmured, her eyes drifting closed. For the wrap. And the warmth. Thank you for trusting me, Jared replied softly. Rest now. I'll keep watch. As sleep claimed her, Talia's last conscious thought was that there were worse ways to survive a storm than in the arms of a kind, warm Martian botanist, a thought that would have scandalized her just hours earlier but now seemed like the most natural conclusion in the world. Outside, the alien storm raged on, but within their small silver sanctuary, two humans from different worlds had found an unexpected connection, one that began with necessity but was quickly becoming something more complex, something neither of them had anticipated when the day began. Talia woke to an unfamiliar sensation of warmth enveloping her body. For a moment, she forgot where she was until she felt the steady rise and fall of Jared's chest against her back, his arm draped casually across her waist. The thermal wrap cocooned them in silver, reflecting their combined body heat with remarkable efficiency. Outside, the howling wind had died down to a gentle whisper. Pale blue light filtered through the cave entrance, suggesting the storm had finally passed. Your sleep patterns are fascinating, Jared murmured against her hair, apparently already awake. You make the most interesting sounds. Talia tensed immediately. I don't snore. Not snoring, he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. More like humming. Similar to the melodic patterns of the vibravines I've been studying. Great, Talia muttered, embarrassment heating her cheeks. I remind you of a plant. His body shook with silent laughter. A compliment, I assure you. Vibravines communicate through those harmonics, they're quite sophisticated. Talia shifted slightly, acutely aware of their continued state of undress within the confined space. The intimacy that had seemed necessary and clinical in the face of death now felt different in the calm light of morning. Not unwelcome, but complicated. We should get moving, she said, her surveyor's practicality asserting itself. The rescue team will be looking for our signals. About that, Jared replied, his tone shifting to something more serious. I checked my comm unit while you were sleeping. The storm damaged the transmitter. We're on our own until we reach the research camp. Talia processed this information with a calm that surprised even her. 18 kilometers across unknown terrain with minimal supplies would be challenging under the best circumstances. Still, they were alive, which was more than she'd expected 12 hours ago. Then we'd better get started, she said, reaching for her clothes neatly folded beside the thermal wrap. They dressed in awkward silence, each turning away from the other in a belated acknowledgement of privacy. When Talia finally faced Jared again, fully clothed in her surveyor's uniform, she found herself strangely disappointed to see him similarly restored to professional appearance, his xenobotanist field gear covering the warm skin she'd been pressed against all night. The path should be this way, she said, consulting her wrist-mounted navigation device as they exited the cave. The alien landscape stretched before them, transformed by the ice storm into a crystalline wonderland. Every surface glittered with a thin layer of frozen precipitation, capturing and refracting the pale blue sunlight in hypnotic patterns. Remarkable, Jared breathed, his scientist's curiosity evident. The molecular structure must be different from Earth ice. Look at the refraction patterns. Despite their urgent need to reach camp, they both paused, momentarily transfixed by the alien beauty surrounding them. The frozen vegetation formed intricate sculptures, each one unique and beautiful in its geometric precision. I've surveyed 14 planets, Talia said softly, and I've never seen anything like this. Jared smiled, a full, genuine expression that transformed his serious features. That's why we do this, isn't it? For moments exactly like this one. Their eyes met, and Talia felt an unexpected connection, not the desperate bond of survival they'd shared in the night, but something deeper. A recognition of kindred spirit, perhaps. Someone who understood the drive that pushed humans to explore the farthest reaches of space, despite the dangers and discomforts. We should take samples, she suggested, surprising herself with the offer. Geology was her field, not botany, but she found herself suddenly invested in Jared's research. Definitely, he agreed, already reaching for his collection kit. The crystalline formations on these indigenous plants could reveal important adaptational strategies. They worked together efficiently, Talia documenting the geological context while Jared collected botanical samples. Their movements developed a natural rhythm, anticipating each other's needs without speaking. It was a synchronized dance Talia usually only achieved with survey partners she'd worked with for years, not someone she'd effectively just met. Ready to move on? Jared asked after they'd gathered sufficient samples. Talia nodded, rechecking their course on her navigator. This way. If we maintain a steady pace, we should reach the ridge by midday. The frozen landscape made for challenging hiking. What had been relatively flat terrain before the storm was now treacherous with slippery patches and hidden ice pockets. They walked close together, occasionally steadying each other on particularly difficult stretches. Tell me about your work, Jared said as they navigated a field of frozen vegetation. What made you become a surveyor? Talia considered the question, surprised by her willingness to share. My parents were both terraformers on the Europa project. I grew up watching them transform a frozen moon into something habitable. That must have been incredible, Jared replied, genuine interest in his voice. It was, she agreed, helping him over a particularly slippery ice formation. But I was more interested in discovering what worlds were already like before we changed them. Understanding rather than transforming. A purist, he said with a smile. I can appreciate that. What about you? She asked. Mars colony to xenobotany isn't the most obvious path. Jared laughed, the sound unexpectedly pleasant in the quiet landscape. No, but it makes a certain sense. When you grow up in enclosed domes where every plant is engineered and controlled, you develop a fascination with what might grow naturally elsewhere. They continued sharing stories as they walked, the conversation flowing easily between professional interests and personal history. Talia found herself revealing more than she typically would to a colleague, about her failed engagement to another surveyor, her complicated relationship with her pioneering parents, her secret dream of discovering a truly habitable world that wouldn't need human adjustment. In turn, Jared spoke of his childhood in the Mars domes, his rebel phase when he defied his engineer parents to study alien plant life, and his recent divorce from a fellow scientist who couldn't understand his need to leave the comfortable research facilities for fieldwork. We're more alike than different, Talia observed as they paused to rest beside a frozen stream, its waters suspended mid-flow in an incredible natural sculpture. I was thinking the same thing, Jared replied, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart rate increase in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. As they sat side by side, Talia noticed something strange happening to the frozen vegetation around them. The crystalline formations were beginning to emit a faint glow, pulses of soft blue light emanating from their centers. Jared, she whispered, pointing to the phenomenon. Are you seeing this? His eyes widened as he observed the gentle luminescence spreading through the field around them. Bioluminescent response, he murmured, immediately taking out his scanner. But what's triggering it? The glowing pattern intensified, creating waves of light that seemed to flow between them like a visual echo. As Talia unconsciously shifted closer to Jared, the lights pulsed brighter. It's responding to us, she realized aloud. To our proximity. Jared ran his scanner over the plants, then over himself, and finally over Talia. His expression shifted from scientific curiosity to amazement. Not just proximity, he said, showing her the readings. Our bioelectrical fields are synchronizing, and the plant life is responding to the harmonized pattern. Talia stared at the data, then at the beautiful light display surrounding them. Is that normal? Not even slightly, Jared replied, a note of wonder in his voice. I've never seen anything like it. Tentatively, Talia reached out and took Jared's hand. The luminescent response intensified immediately, waves of blue-green light rippling outward from where their skin touched. It's beautiful, she whispered, watching as the patterns changed and flowed like a visual representation of something intangible between them. It is, Jared agreed, his voice equally soft. But when Talia glanced up, she found him looking not at the light show around them, but at her face, illuminated in the ethereal glow. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities neither had anticipated when they'd left the cave that morning. Then Jared's scanner beeped, breaking the spell. We should keep moving, he said, reluctantly releasing her hand. The temperature will drop again once this sun sets. As they continued their journey, the bioluminescent response followed them, creating a subtle path of light that trailed their movements across the frozen landscape. Talia found herself hyper-aware of Jared's presence beside her, the rhythm of his breathing, the occasional brush of his arm against hers, the thoughtful profile of his face as he studied their surroundings. They reached the ridge by mid-afternoon, gaining elevation that provided a stunning view of the crystalline terrain they traversed. In the distance, barely visible, were the domed structures of the research camp. We'll make it before dark, Talia observed, relief evident in her voice despite a strange reluctance she couldn't quite name. Yes, Jared agreed, sounding similarly conflicted. Back to separate research teams, separate schedules. They stood side by side, looking toward safety and the end of their unexpected adventure together. The bioluminescent response had followed them up the ridge, surrounding them in a gentle glow that seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeats. Talia, Jared said finally, turning to face her directly. Last night in the cave. Was survival, she finished for him, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Yes, he agreed. But this, he gestured to the luminescent patterns flowing between them, this is something else entirely. Before she could respond, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. A sharp crack split the air as the ice-covered ridge began to fracture, destabilized by their weight combined with the day's warming temperatures. "Run!" Jared shouted, grabbing Talia's hand as the ground began to give way beneath them. They sprinted along the crumbling ridge, ice and rock collapsing behind them in a thunderous cascade. The path ahead narrowed dangerously, forcing them to slow just as a massive section gave way directly in their path, creating a gap several meters wide. "We'll have to jump," Talia gasped, assessing the distance with her surveyor's eye. "Together, on 3. Jared nodded, his hand tightening around hers. "Together." As they counted and leapt across the chasm, the bioluminescent field around them flared brilliantly, as if responding to their synchronized fear and determination. For a suspended moment, they flew through space surrounded by blue-green light, then crashed onto the opposite side, rolling to safety as the ridge continued to collapse behind them. They lay side by side on solid ground, breathing heavily, hands still clasped tightly together. Around them, the light patterns pulsed in perfect rhythm with their racing hearts. "That was close," Talia finally managed, turning her head to look at Jared. "Too close," he agreed, meeting her gaze. Then, without warning, he leaned over and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was brief but electric, sending shockwaves through Talia's body that had nothing to do with their near fall. When they separated, the bioluminescent field around them had intensified to an almost blinding radiance. "That wasn't just survival," Jared said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "No," Talia agreed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Definitely not just survival." As they helped each other up and continued their journey toward the research camp, the luminescent path glowed before them, marking a trail that seemed to lead not just to safety, but to something neither of them had expected to find on this remote, frozen world, a connection that defied explanation, as beautiful and unexpected as the light that followed wherever they went together. The research camp appeared over the horizon like a mirage, dome structures glinting in the alien sunlight, the familiar Interstellar Research Division logo a welcome sight after their perilous journey. Talia felt conflicting emotions as they approached, relief at reaching safety, yet a strange reluctance knowing their time alone together was ending. "There'll be questions," she said, slowing her pace slightly. "About what happened during the storm?" Jared nodded, understanding her concern. "We stick to the facts. We got separated from our teams, sought shelter together, and made our way back when the storm cleared." "And the rest?" Talia asked, glancing at their hands, still loosely intertwined, the bioluminescent glow around them pulsing steadily. "Is between us," he finished, giving her hand a gentle squeeze before releasing it. "For now, at least." The camp's perimeter sensors must have detected their approach, because the main airlock door of the nearest dome slid open as they drew near. Research Director Patel emerged, his expression cycling rapidly from surprise to relief to professional composure. "Nash, Weller," he greeted them briskly. "Your teams reported you missing after the storm hit. Good to see you both intact." "Thank you, sir," Talia replied formally. "We were fortunate to find shelter and each other." Director Patel's eyes narrowed slightly as he noticed the faint luminescence that still clung to them, more visible now in the shadows of the dome entrance. "You appear to have brought something back with you." Jared stepped forward, seamlessly shifting into scientist mode. "A previously unobserved bioluminescent response in the local flora, sir. It seems to react to bioelectrical fields. I've collected samples for analysis." "Fascinating," Patel replied, though his tone suggested administrative concern rather than scientific interest. "Both of you report to decontamination immediately, then medical for full scans. Standard protocol after extended field exposure." They followed the familiar procedures, separate decontamination chambers, thorough sterilization of their equipment and clothing, medical scans that seemed to take forever as the doctors puzzled over the trace bioluminescence that refused to dissipate despite the cleaning protocols. "Everything checks out normal," Dr. Harlow finally declared, reviewing Talia's medical scan results with a bemused expression. "Except for this residual luminescent signature. It doesn't appear harmful, but I've never seen anything quite like it. Dr. Weller has samples for analysis," Talia explained, trying to sound professionally detached. "I believe it's a symbiotic response from the local plant life." "Indeed," Dr. Harlow murmured, making notes in her file. "Well, you're cleared for regular duties, but I want daily check-ins until we understand this phenomenon better." Released from medical, Talia found herself hesitating in the corridor. Protocol dictated she should report to her survey team, update them on her findings, and resume her interrupted work. Instead, she found herself drawn toward the xenobotany lab where she knew Jared would be processing his samples. The lab door was open, and she paused in the entrance, watching him work. He moved with focused precision, carefully preparing slides of the luminescent plant material, his expression intent. The faint glow still surrounded him, pulsing gently in a rhythm she somehow knew matched her own heartbeat. As if sensing her presence, he looked up, a smile spreading across his face that made her heart skip. "Your medical check's clear." "All normal except for our glowing friend here," she replied, stepping into the lab and gesturing to the soft light that still connected them across the room. "Yours?" "The same," he confirmed. "I'm running initial analyses now, but I think—" A klaxon suddenly blared through the station, cutting him off. Red emergency lights began flashing in the corridor. "Attention all personnel," Director Patel's voice announced over the communication system. "Sensors have detected an approaching atmospheric phenomenon. All outdoor research teams return to base immediately. Seal all external access points. This is not a drill." Jared quickly secured his samples in a containment unit. "The storm must be circling back around." "That's unusual for this region," Talia frowned, moving to help him lock down the lab equipment. The weather modeling didn't suggest any cyclical patterns. They joined the flow of researchers heading to the central dome for the emergency briefing. The station's meteorologist, Finn Abra, stood before a projection showing satellite imagery of a massive, swirling cloud formation approaching the research camp. "What we're dealing with isn't technically a storm," Abra explained, highlighting the strange formation. "It's a pollen drift from the southern continent, carried north by unexpected wind pattern changes after the ice storm." Director Patel stepped forward. "All personnel are to remain indoors until the drift passes. Our air filtration systems have been adjusted to handle any particles that might penetrate the dome structures. This is primarily a precautionary measure." As the briefing dispersed, Talia felt a strange tickle in her throat. She coughed lightly, drawing Jared's concerned gaze. "Are you all right?" "Fine," she assured him, though the sensation persisted. "Probably just dry air from the decontamination process." They made their way to the observation deck, joining other researchers watching as the golden cloud approached the camp. It was strangely beautiful, not the threatening darkness of a storm but a shimmering mass that caught the sunlight like suspended dust motes. "Remarkable density," Jared murmured, scientific curiosity evident in his voice. "Those must be incredibly lightweight spores to remain airborne in such concentration." The pollen drift enveloped the research camp within minutes, reducing visibility to near zero outside the dome's transparent sections. The golden particles swirled and danced in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, occasionally clustering against the outer surface of the dome as if examining the structure. Talia's cough returned, more insistent this time. She tried to suppress it, but soon found herself struggling to catch her breath. The tickle had transformed into a burning sensation that spread from her throat to her chest. "Talia?" Jared's voice seemed to come from far away, though he stood right beside her. "Your face, you're pale." She tried to respond but couldn't form words through the tightness in her lungs. The observation deck tilted around her, and she felt herself falling before strong arms caught her. Medical emergency on the observation deck. Jared's voice called out, the alarm in his tone penetrating her rapidly fogging consciousness. I need help here now. The world dissolved into fragments, being carried to the medical bay, oxygen masks, urgent voices discussing anaphylactic response, something about pollen penetrating the air filters. Through it all, she was aware of Jared's presence, his hand gripping hers, the bioluminescent connection between them pulsing with increased intensity as her own vital signs weakened. The conventional treatments aren't working, Dr. Harlow's voice cut through Talia's haze. Her airways are still constricting despite the antihistamines. It's not a conventional allergic reaction, Jared insisted. Look at the molecular structure of the pollen, it's forming a bond with her respiratory tissue similar to the bioluminescent plants. What are you suggesting, Dr. Weller? Director Patel's voice now, tense with concern. I think I can synthesize a countermeasure from the samples we collected, Jared replied. The plant material that created our bioluminescent effect might neutralize the pollen through biochemical interference. That's completely theoretical, Dr. Harlow objected. We have no idea how it might interact with her system. We have some idea, Jared countered, his voice growing passionate. The luminescence has remained stable in both our systems despite decontamination. There's a compatible bond there that could be leveraged against the pollen's effects. Talia tried to squeeze his hand, to communicate her consent, but her muscles wouldn't respond. The burning in her lungs had become unbearable, each breath a struggle that yielded diminishing returns. Do it, Director Patel finally ordered. She won't last until the evac ship arrives. Time blurred again as Talia drifted in and out of consciousness. She was vaguely aware of Jared working frantically at a nearby lab station, of the medical team monitoring her failing vital signs, of hushed conversations about the unprecedented nature of her reaction to the alien pollen. Then Jared was beside her again, a syringe filled with luminescent blue liquid in his hand. This will either break the pollen's bond with your respiratory system, he told her softly, or strengthen our connection. Hopefully both. The injection burned like ice in her veins, spreading cold fire through her chest and then outward to her extremities. For one terrifying moment, breathing became impossible, her lungs refused to expand, her heart stuttered in its rhythm. The monitors around her bed screamed warnings. Then, like a wave breaking, relief flooded through her system. The burning sensation receded, replaced by a cool, soothing presence that expanded her constricted airways. She gasped deeply, sweet oxygen filling her lungs for the first time in hours. It's working, Dr. Harlow confirmed, watching the monitors return to normal parameters. Respiratory function stabilizing. Talia opened her eyes to find Jared watching her intently, concern and hope warring in his expression. Around them, the bioluminescent field had intensified dramatically, now clearly visible even under the harsh medical bay lighting. It pulsed in perfect synchronization with both their heartbeats, creating a complex pattern that seemed to weave them together. What did you do? She whispered, her voice hoarse but functional. I gambled, he admitted, relief evident as he heard her speak. Used the bioluminescent compound as a carrier for an enzyme that breaks down the pollen protein. It worked because we're already connected, she finished, understanding intuitively what the science couldn't yet explain. Director Patel cleared his throat, reminding them they weren't alone. I'll expect a full report on this incident and your solution, Dr. Weller. For now, it appears the crisis has passed. As the medical team and administration officials filed out, leaving them with privacy save for the monitoring equipment, Talia felt a profound shift in her awareness of Jared. The connection that had begun in the cave of necessity, strengthened during their journey, and saved her life today was now undeniable, a physical manifestation of something that defied the clinical language of their scientific training. You saved my life, she said simply. The plants saved your life, he corrected with characteristic scientific precision, then softened. Though I may have helped translate between the two of you. Talia laughed weakly, then grew serious. What happens now? With this? She gestured to the luminous field surrounding them. I'm not sure, Jared admitted. But I've received orders. Once you're stabilized, I'm being transferred back to the Central Research Facility. Apparently, my findings warrant priority analysis. The news hit Talia with unexpected force. When? Transport leaves tomorrow morning. He hesitated, then continued with careful words. There's a position open for a geological surveyor on the same project. I took the liberty of submitting your name, given your first-hand experience with the phenomenon. Hope flared within her. And? Director Patel is considering it, but... Jared's expression fell slightly. Your team here is short-staffed already, and your current survey work is considered essential to the mission. Talia nodded slowly, the reality of their situation settling over her like a weight. They belonged to different research divisions with separate priorities and assignments. Their unexpected connection, beautiful as it was, didn't fit neatly into the compartmentalized structure of interstellar research bureaucracy. We'll figure it out, she said with more confidence than she felt. This, she squeezed his hand, watching the luminescent response brighten, isn't something that happens every day, even in our line of work. Jared smiled, the genuine warmth of it reaching his eyes. Definitely not in the standard xenobotany curriculum. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the beautiful patterns of light dance between them, each lost in thoughts of what might come next. Outside the dome, the golden pollen drift continued its strange migration, unaware of the catalyst it had become in the lives of two human researchers who had found each other in the most unexpected of places. Rest, Jared finally said, reluctantly rising from her bedside. I need to prepare my samples for transport. Jared, Talia called as he reached the door. When he turned back, she continued softly, thank you. Not just for today, but for the cave, for everything. He nodded, understanding all she wasn't saying. Some experiments yield unexpected results. Those are usually the most valuable ones. As he left, the luminescent connection between them stretched but didn't break, maintaining a faint glow that linked them across the increasing distance. Talia watched it with wonder, recognizing that whatever had begun between them in that cave of necessity had evolved into something neither science nor distance could easily explain away. The next morning came too quickly. Talia, released from medical with strict orders to rest, made her way to the transport bay despite Dr. Harlow's protests. She found Jared supervising the loading of his carefully preserved samples, his expression brightening visibly when he spotted her. You should be resting, he admonished gently. I couldn't let you leave without saying goodbye properly, she replied, suddenly shy despite everything they'd shared. Around them, the luminescence pulsed with increased intensity, responding to their proximity and emotions in ways that drew curious glances from the transport crew. I've submitted my findings to the Central Research Database, Jared said, keeping his voice professional for the benefit of those nearby. Including the connection theory and its applications for xenobiological compatibility. Talia understood what he wasn't saying openly. He documented their case, created a scientific justification for keeping their research linked, established a foundation for future collaboration. Final boarding call, announced the transport officer, interrupting their moment. Jared hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. Whatever this is between us, it's not just biological, not just scientific. I know, Talia replied, resisting the urge to close the remaining distance between them. I'll request joint research status, he promised. Find a way to continue our investigation. The luminescence flared between them, reflecting the intensity of emotions neither could fully express in the public setting of the transport bay. With visible reluctance, Jared finally backed toward the boarding ramp. This isn't an ending, he called as the doors began to close. It's a new hypothesis to test. Talia stood watching as the transport lifted off, carrying Jared toward the Central Research Facility on the other side of the planet. The luminescent connection stretched between them, thinning but never breaking as the distance increased. She raised her hand in a final farewell, understanding now what she hadn't when they'd first sought shelter in that ice cave. Some connections, once formed, transcend ordinary boundaries, of space, of professional divisions, even of species. What had begun as necessity had transformed into something neither had been looking for but both now recognized as invaluable. As the transport disappeared from view, Talia turned back toward the research dome, the faint glow still surrounding her like a promise. Whatever came next, they would find a way to bridge the distance. After all, they were scientists, solving impossible problems was their specialty. And this particular problem, this beautiful, unexpected connection, was one she was suddenly determined to solve, no matter what bureaucratic obstacles stood in their way.